So Cenk and Anna of the Young Turks had a pretty heated debate here about Trump supporters. Now, I thought this was a really interesting back and forth. I thought it was a very substantive back and forth. They really got into it, so we're going to dive into it in a second. There was a whole bunch of chatter online over the past week or so. Apparently, there's a new, different scandal involving TYT. I think one of their trans hosts left the network, and I don't know all the specifics. I just saw that it was all over Twitter and everybody has a take. So we're not going to get into that because I don't know enough of the details to really comment on that. But I wanted to show you this back and forth because this I find incredibly interesting. So let's dive into it.
We had somebody earlier tell us that if Trump was standing on the steps of the White House and murdered someone, he'd still vote for him. Same with you?
Mm-hmm.
How come?
I don't know. I like Trump. He just got something about him.
Trump can do no wrong. That was the dominant message among some Trump supporters who spoke to our very own Michael Schor at the former president's rally in Pickens, South Carolina over the weekend. Let's watch a little more of the reaction to Michael Schor's question.
There are indictments. There's audio tape of him with classified documents, sharing them with people who didn't have that security clearance. Does any of that bother you?
No, I think they've been after him so long that all of this is just a witch hunt, like he described it. I don't think there's anything Trump's done wrong. I think that the desperate opposition is just after him. I mean, they started out, and they've been after him 8 different ways, and they're going to keep after him until they can get him in jail, I think.
They went after Richard Nixon, they went after Bill Clinton, and now the courts in several different states are finding different things about Trump. Is there anything that could happen with him indictment-wise that would say, all right, maybe this disqualifies him for president?
Not for me. I'm with him to the finish.
All right, thank you so much.
He could stand on the front steps of the White House and commit murder, and I'm with him.
So that's 2 Trump supporters at this rally. Now, granted, they probably spoke to 20 or whatever, but they took the 2 that made this point. And look, that's a hard one to defend, right? If he committed murder in front of my face, I'm going to still support him. Okay, so this, you'll see, this becomes the crux of their disagreement. Let's keep going.
So what I found interesting about that video is, on one hand, when he's referring to the Trump indictments, he's kind of repeating what he's heard in right-wing media about how there's no there there, these indictments mean nothing, there's no evidence of him engaging in any wrongdoing. And I do think that that statement is the product of his media filter bubble. However, with that said, he also admits that if Trump committed murder, he would still support him. And so that goes against, what my belief is in regard to most Trump supporters who it's not that they support his criminality, it's just that they don't believe his criminality to be true. But in this particular case, clearly this supporter doesn't really care too much about potential criminality or if he literally committed murder, which blows my mind.
And the guy before him and a lot more people. So let me give you both sides here because there's reality on both sides. So what do I mean by that? So first of all, having seen a ton of these interacting with Republicans outside of these interviews, but also seeing the whole breadth of the interviews that we do all the time. First of all, not all Republicans think that way. And so it's easy to say, okay, they're all the same, and which by the way, they think of us too, right? And so I have seen slightly more moderate Republicans, and certainly I've seen plenty of Republicans who would say, well, if he was on tape and he killed someone, yeah, that's too much, right? So I'm being fair. Number 2, I understand where they're going with the double standard. They say, look, you're telling me Trump broke all these laws, but then you've got all these other politicians who are corrupt and nobody ever says anything about them. And they're not wrong about that. Mainstream media, if you're an outsider or you don't belong in the establishment, whether you're Trump, Bernie, etc., they'll find 1,000 things wrong with you. And then the most corrupt people on earth are your mainstream Republicans and Democrats, and mainstream media can't find anything wrong with them. Just can't find it, right? Give me Jack Smith as a prosecutor, I'll get you incredible things that Mitch McConnell's done wrong, Nancy Pelosi's done wrong. So they're not exactly wrong about the double standard. Okay, now having said that, 2 things jump out at me on the other side. Okay, so one is, look, there used to be something I call the Barkley rule. Charles Barkley would say so many crazy things that eventually it just became a Barkley thing. Like other people would get in trouble and Barkley wouldn't, because you're like, oh, it's just Charles Barkley. So Trump did the same thing, that was easy, right? Then Trump did a new thing that I call the Trump rule. He broke so many laws that his own supporters think, well, it must be persecution. Nobody could have broken that many laws. So they're obviously targeting him. They're targeting him for this. They must be trying to get him. No, they're a little bit trying to get him. And they're mainly, Trump broke 1,000 laws.
So that's an interesting theory. I never thought of it like that before. There could be a grain of truth in it, but Anna goes on to bring up what I think is a very good point, which is, well, the first couple cracks they took at this, it was like Russiagate. And that imploded spectacularly. And people started to go, well, I guess you are trying to get him because you said he was, getting pissed on by hookers in a Russian hotel. That wasn't true. You said he was a Putin puppet since 1987. Jonathan Chait wrote that article. That wasn't true. So, when he says witch hunt, if there were some things that were witch hunts, or at the very least were just inaccurate, well, then people are going to start to question it more and more. So, so far, I think it's all fair points, but let's start to get into the disagreement.
Well, he's got two good boys that are hunters, and he stands for American values is what I love about him. I just think he's one of us. Instead, I know he's very rich, but he has our values, and has our back.
Describe that for me. What are your values that Donald Trump shares with you then?
Parents in control of their children, being able to make choices for your family. America's been assaulted. Open borders, all the issues. We all know the issues. And nobody stood under the attack that Trump stood under. And look what he's done. He's hanging in there. He's for us. He loves this country. And I'm going to support him to the end. I hope he wins. We need him. Biden, to me, if he had not been a career politician, he might have been better. But he's lived in Washington all his life. I think we need term limits. I think we need to stop all these old people from running Washington, D.C. It's corrupt.
Well, the old people, Trump isn't, there's not a huge difference in age.
Yeah, I should rephrase that. The old people that's been in Washington all their life.
And one of the other things that seem to be repeated in these interviews is the issue with Biden being corrupt. Right now, they seem to be completely unaware of the money that Trump has taken from wealthy donors, the corruption that he engaged in. But nonetheless, they were specific about corruption. And in that interview that you just watched, he mentioned other things, being able to make decisions for your own family and all of that. Open borders, he thinks that there are open borders. He's concerned about that as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, that doesn't make this situation any better. So I'll give you my point of view. When he says, hey, I like that his boys are hunters. I don't. I think that those guys massacred those poor defenseless animals. They weren't just doing like deer hunting. They were doing a big game for entertainment. Right. But that's in prelude to, okay, you like hunters. That's your business. It's not my business. Okay, it is what it is. And so that's a fine reason to like them. And even though I disagree. Washington, they're from, all the other guys are from Washington and they're corrupted by Washington. That's a totally fair point, okay? So, but Trump is also corrupted by Washington 10,000 times more, but that's the fault of the Democrats. For example, Trump and his PACs took over $100 million from Sheldon Adelson twice. And the Democrats never talk about it. Why? Because they're also corrupt. And they don't want to talk about the donors because they're swimming in donor money. But if you wanted to pound Trump, you'd pound him on his corruption. The guy who did anything and everything for Adelson, even gave his wife a Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's a joke, total joke, but those guys don't know it. Now the bad stuff. He has our values, does he? What's your values? I mean, you don't mean family values. He's raw dogging porn stars, and he says terrible things, does terrible things. You don't mean family values. So what values are you talking about? Oh, he believes in putting parents in charge of children. That means I don't like gay people. I'm sorry, that's what it means.
No, that means he wants to be able to make a decision or help.
A decision about what?
He doesn't want schools making decisions for
about
his kids.
About gay people. And racism, right? He doesn't want racism taught. Those are the two issues, Anna. Those are the two issues in the schools.
Those are not the two issues, okay? One of the issues that you're totally downplaying right now, not even mentioning, is that some school districts want to, let's say a student comes out and identifies as transgender, school districts want to support that student and help him or her through that transition without ever having to notify the parents. I think there are issues there. Okay, and I do not begrudge parents for being concerned about that.
Anna, I agree with you. But you're finding a sliver of an issue. That guy's not talking, he doesn't even know that. All that guy knows, and what 98% of them know is, I don't like them teaching about gay people in school, okay? And I don't like them saying, oh, we were racist back to slavery and Jim Crow and redlining. Come on, we know what it means. That's 98% of their efforts in schools. And then when he says open borders, there aren't actually open borders. What he's saying is, I don't like Latino immigrants. They don't look like me. I don't like them. That's my values. Sorry. Republicans, I wish you were better. Not all of you, but a lot of you. The MAGA guys, that's why he says, as long as you're like us, I don't mind if you shoot someone on Fifth Avenue or in front of the White House. I don't mind because you're us and not them. Keep it real. And that's what you're seeing. And that's, by the way, also why they're never going to turn on him. Not all of them, but hardcore MAGA never, ever going to turn on Trump. Why? Because he is them. He is them. They see him, they're like, that guy's just as racist as I am. I like it. DeSantis has an ad out now about how much he hates gay people more than Trump does. And that might hurt him because they're like, oh, I thought Trump hated gay people as much as I do, right? So when he says values, he means the opposite of values. I watched all the tapes. All of them say, he's like us. They don't mean all of us. They mean, and when you ask them about the issues, they always go to, I don't like Latinos, I mean immigrants. I don't like gay people, I mean, I want parental control in schools. So that's the reality, you can see it all over the tapes.
That is your interpretation. None of that was actually said. It is what you have taken out of his statements there.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Right,
and hey, by the way, guys.
That.
Oh, by the way, guys, you guys all be the judge.
Just like anyone can watch the statements you made in regard to the story out of Israel today and say, he said what he said, and I could either take what he said at face value or just put words in his mouth and call him an anti-Semite. That would infuriate you, no?
Anna, okay, look, we have a different interpretation. Okay, we have a different. I saw the tape.
I don't agree.
I've seen 100 tapes.
I don't agree with that guy. Let me be clear about that, okay? But putting words in his mouth, I think is unnecessary. You can actually address what he said there without extrapolating and implying that he said something that he didn't actually say there.
So what's the benign interpretation? He's worried about taking jobs when we have 3.7 unemployment, record unemployment. He's not worried about losing jobs. He's worried about losing his culture.
You just straight up said, you just totally disregarded everything he said.
No, I didn't. I went exactly on what he said.
You boiled it down to, he's just racist. That's what you boiled it down to.
Because that is what he's saying.
Okay, that's your interpretation.
What do you think? There's a lovely interpretation of open borders and these goddamn immigrants coming in?
They genuinely think there are open borders. Okay, anyway, whatever.
And then what's the open borders do? What does it do? What does it do? Does it take our jobs? It doesn't take our jobs.
They think drug traffickers and MS-13 are pouring into the country and causing crime and violence and threatening their lives. That's what they think because that is what they hear in the media.
So that is fair. So that is what they hear on Fox News all the time. So they're scared. So Anna makes a good point. On the other hand, why does it work? If you said, oh my God, all these white people are coming in from Pennsylvania and Ohio and they're dangerous, it wouldn't work, right? The guy hears, oh, dangerous Latinos coming in with the crime and the drugs. Wait a minute. American-born citizens commit twice as much crime as undocumented immigrants. So why aren't you scared about natural-born American citizens? They're very dangerous. They're twice as dangerous as undocumented immigrants, 4 times as dangerous as naturalized immigrants. Why aren't you scared about natural-born Americans?
They're probably not privy to that information.
Okay, yeah, I agree. At the same time, they don't like, Anna, why did Tucker Carlson constantly say, your town was like this, but it doesn't look like that anymore, does it?
Because he's propagandizing
it doesn't feel
people.
That way.
That is what he did.
That's right, and they propagandize people, and what tool do they use? They use racism. It doesn't look like it used to. Things aren't the way they used to be. Oh, you loved it when you were in charge, you loved it. Now these sons of bitches have equality. We don't want equality. And guys, you saw the tape, and you can see a lot more tapes. Michael interviewed a lot of people. Check it out on our channels. And then you saw both Anna's interpretation and mine, and then 1,000 other interpretations. And then you make up your mind, okay? But what I saw, again, blasting out of every one of those interviews is, he's us. I don't give a goddamn what he does.
Woo! So that was kind of heated. You could tell there was quite a bit of tension between them there. But look, I have to say, I like it when they have debates like this. I do. I like it when they have debates like this. I like it when it gets passionate. It sort of reminds me of, old school TYT in a sense. So this is a dynamic that I think is actually super duper interesting, and I find the content of this debate amazing as well. So here, let's dive into it. So what Anna is trying to do in that clip is like, let's steelman the Trump supporters' argument. Let's not put words in his mouth and straw man or potentially straw man what they're saying. Like, that's the sense of what I get Anna's trying to do. And I think ultimately that's a noble goal. And I think that that's what you should do in any argument, really, is like, I don't want to like twist what somebody's saying into the worst possible version of it and then slap it down, because that's not fruitful, right? To put it mildly, that's not fruitful. So that's what she's trying to do there. But I'll also say, when it comes to steel manning, you are going to run into some instances where there really isn't a good steel man for a point somebody's making. So effectively, if you go to a Trump rally at this late date and you're going there, this is Trump's biggest fans. These are the people who, after all this time, have not abandoned him, and they're still ride or die. So in other words, you're very likely to get a TFG at one of these rallies, right? In the same way that, it's like if you went to a college campus and talked to somebody with purple hair who says the Soviet Union was based in I love Stalin, right? Like, I could try to steelman the argument that somebody like that would make, but no matter how much I steelman it, it still is going to come out like kind of ridiculous, right? So I agree with her goal of steelmanning the opposition, and I agree with engaging honestly at face value. And I think in the long run, you'll change more minds if you do that. But also at the same time, sometimes you have to call a spade. And look, with this particular person, or people, I should say, who they talked to, they spoke to 2 people. One of them said, I'd support Trump if he committed murder in front of my face. And another one said the exact same thing. They said, quote, I don't think there's anything Trump's done wrong. And then again, the real giveaway, as I think Cenk correctly hones in on, is the open borders thing. Because it's one thing if you believe something that's not true, but there's like some sort of stretch of an argument for the thing, or you could see if you interpret it a certain way that maybe there's a grain of truth in it. It's another thing when something is just completely and utterly fake and made up and the exact opposite of the truth. So with Joe Biden, he's continued a lot of Donald Trump's border policies. He's continued a lot of them. He continued to remain in Mexico for a really long time. He continued Title 42, which was the idea that there is no due process. If you come into this country during the pandemic, we're just going to kick you out. You know, breaking deportation records in the same way that Barack Obama, when Biden was VP to Barack Obama, they were breaking deportation records. So when I hear criticism like Joe Biden's in favor of open borders, it's very hard for me to be sympathetic or to steelman that point, because all I want to say is, listen, man, you're just wrong. Like, you're just wrong. This is not happening. And then to Cenk's point, yeah, there is some semblance of that. That's like, not only is open borders wrong, but also, why are you really afraid of open borders? When we covered the same study he brought up there was a Cato Institute study. It was a right-wing study from a right-wing think tank. And they found, in no uncertain terms, undocumented immigrants commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans, and documented immigrants commit less crime. So both documented and undocumented immigrants are less likely to be criminal than native-born Americans. So the concern of open borders, which we don't have, and oh my God, they're criminals, which they're not, it's hard to look at that and say anything but you're just wrong and you are super brainwashed and you're TFG. Now let me get to the final point, which is, I think, the point of agreement, right? Which is, so Anna's main focus is, well, hold on now. With somebody like this guy, don't be so hard on him because it's not really his fault, because he's been fed a steady diet of misinformation and disinformation from lying charlatan con men for such a long time. And Cenk kind of agrees to that, right? I think he still argues like, okay, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to take personal responsibility for your media diet, and it's incumbent upon you to some extent to fact check it and figure out whether these things are actually true. But I think that actually is a point of agreement where Anna's saying the main problem here is the people who brainwash this dude. That's the main problem. And I think Cenk would more or less agree with that the main problem are people who brainwash this dude. It's the media. It's conservative media, right-wing media. It's Fox News, Newsmax, One American News Network, whatever charlatan far-right podcasters there are, whether it be Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or Charlie Kirk or whoever, people who like say things that are demonstrably and provably untrue on a regular basis, and then these people get a steady diet of that, so they think this is the obvious truth. So blame, first and foremost, lies at the feet of those people. And I think that's fair. But yeah, with these particular people, look, once you say, if Trump killed somebody in front of my face, I still wouldn't care, you lose a lot of my sympathy. And it becomes a nearly impossible task for me to strawman you when I hear the rest of what you say, right? Because I know where you're coming from. I know they're almost admitting my love of Trump is like a fundamentalist religion, right? So insofar as we can change people's minds, these are not the first people on the list who you're trying to engage with to change their mind. They're like literally dead last. There are plenty of people in the middle who you can change their minds. There are plenty of people who are center-right who can change their minds. There are plenty of normie conservatives who you can change their minds. But here we're talking about somebody who's kind of far-right, sort of proudly in a Trump cult-like mind state. And so I guess overall in this argument, I'm a little more with Cenk, but it's only as it pertains to these particular people. The particular ones they interviewed there, where I do think they're kind of TFG. I do think it's a Herculean effort to steelman their positions, and even if you do it, you end up with like, this is stupid and crazy, right? And I'm in favor of calling a spade. I'm in favor of keeping it real. And so if you're keeping it real, you got to go, holy shit, where do we even begin to disentangle all this propaganda? But final point is, I'm with Anna on the overall approach to how to deal with politics and with people, right? You can't really start the conversation by saying, what you really mean is you're racist and sexist and homophobic. That's what you really mean when you say these things. Because if you say that, well then whatever 2% chance there was of deconverting the person is totally gone down. Now it's zero. And I think that's the part that she's focused on. She's like, look, if we're going to change minds, we're going to have to try our best to steelman it and then try our best to respond and walk people through it and start deprogramming all that propaganda. So on the broader goal, I kind of agree with her. Don't strawman, Don't be hyperbolic. Don't jump to accusations of racism, sexism, and homophobia. Let's actually try to change minds. And in order to do that, we got to engage honestly and steal, man. I'm with her on that paradigm. But I'm with him just only on the particulars of these specific guys because they've made it crystal clear if there is a chance of deprogramming them, it's like 1%, right? And that's a big, I'm perhaps being too kind by calling it 1% because you saw it with your own two eyes. If he murdered somebody, I'd be fine with it. Quote, I don't think he's done anything wrong. And open borders is the big problem in the country. So anyway, there you have it. Good debate. I hope they keep having debates like this because it's super substantive and it gives me something to react to. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.